Destiny of a Savior by Famous Fault. Chapter 21. Idle Hope. Mahad felt it the instant they entered the castle. Harry Potter and his two accomplices had returned to Hogwarts. Mahad was with Rebecca in his room, since neither of the two actually required sleep. They intended to keep each other company when the rest of the castle slept. It happened on more than one occasion that Mahad sensed someone, often Neville or Ginny, out in the dead of the night, sneaking around to cause some more havoc. The Egyptian tended to follow them, make sure they weren't caught. Of course, as big a mouth Neville had, Mahad could not protect him from everything. It did not take long before the Carrows decided that Neville was no longer an asset to the new Wizarding Order. At first, they had been reluctant to harm him, seeing as he was pureblood. But in the end, they had decided they could do away with him. Mahad had helped Neville escape discreetly, and Neville himself had thought of the room of requirement. Neville never knew he had been helped. Most students who had taken refuge in the room of requirement had been sent there by Mahad. Of course, no one knew this. The only ones aware of how much Mahad actually did, aside from Rebecca, were Professor McGonagall and some of the second years, who had all sworn to keep their mouths shut. Mahad, upon choosing to teach the children his magic, rather than the magic wizards normally practiced, had taken quite a gamble. It had turned out quite well, though. The second years were remarkably poor at magic, charms, potions, transfiguration. It was all hopeless. It was also exactly the way that Mahad had planned it, because, at the other hand, their spiritual awareness were raised to the level a bit above that of an ordinary muggle. Their inner magic was latent enough to diminish the strength of a spell when it hit them, and some of them had even shown signs of being able to utilize outer magic. Some of them had guessed that he had been responsible, and some of them had the courage to confront him with it. He had told them the truth about what he had done, and as a result some of them set up secret rendezvous with him to gain the ability to use outer magic. Like Mahad had told them, it took years to become a proper magician, and in the 2 years they had had to learn, they could do little else than circus tricks. But perhaps it would do. Being independent of a wand could prove to be useful. This showed when one of the second years had become thrown in the dungeons when he was caught by the Carrows on his way back to bed. The second year, a Hufflepuff boy, had however managed to break free. They had chained him up, taken his wand, locked the door, and told him that he was allowed to walk out whenever he pleased, if he could. The boy had, cheeky as he was, waited for the Carrows to leave, and when they did, he used a small amount of energy it took to open a lock. He had unchained himself and let himself out. When he the next morning showed up at Muggle studies as if nothing had happened, Amicus and Alecto had been furious, but had not taken any further action. It were instances like that which made Mahad grateful that some magical tricks, unnecessary as they might seem, were simple enough to teach the youngsters. Now, however, it weren't parlor tricks he was thinking about as he felt the presence of the 3 highly wanted teens. He informed Rebecca about the fact that Harry had returned to Hogwarts. "That can only mean one thing," Rebecca said. "We are going to fight, at last, the final battle." "It does not need to be that way, Rebecca," Mahad said reproachful. "We do not know why they are here just yet." "Then let's go and find out," she said impatiently. "Where are they?" "Room of requirement. We must—" Mahad started, but Rebecca had already flown off, using the advantage of passing through walls to get there quicker. Mahad swore uncharacteristically and followed her. He, not being human, could also pass through walls, if he really wanted to. Rebecca, although moving fast, could never escape Mahad. He could sense her presence in the same way he could feel that of everyone else. So he followed her presence, although he was pretty certain that she was on her way to the room of requirement. Where else would she go? Then Rebecca disappeared. Mahad did not know how else to describe it. One moment her presence was there, the next it had vanished. The ghosts, who had all disappeared so suddenly, had the same thing happen to Rebecca. She was nowhere in the castle, not even the room of requirement. The room, although a stealthy piece of magic, was not good enough to keep his senses out. He could sense more and more people entering. Luna Lovegood, Peter Lapard, Ginny Weasley, and several other people whose presence Mahad did not recognize. But Rebecca was nowhere to be sensed. He stopped in his tracks. Where the hell was he supposed to go now? Where could Rebecca have disappeared to? He and the American girl had been looking for an answer to the disappearances of the ghosts ever since they had discovered it. They had never found an answer, and now Rebecca was gone too. He considered checking the come-and-go room anyway, but he decided that it would frighten the oblivious students a little too much. They were still wary of him, uncertain where he stood. His appearance would not please them. As long as he was an unknown factor, he had the advantage. It was better if the Death Eaters thought he did not care as long as possible, preserving the element of surprise. Even so, he made his way towards the room of requirement. They did not have to know that he was there. He did, however, not make it that far before the wall melted away and two invisible figures left the safe harbor. Luna and Harry, Mahad realized, not needing to see someone to recognize them. He followed them. For the time being, there wasn't really anything he could do for Rebecca. In Mahad's opinion, the two moved far too slow for comfort. He wanted them out of the corridors. A patrolling teacher could run into them at any given time. At last, the two reached the common room in Ravenclaw Tower. Mahad himself had, however, not been careful enough. He had been so cautious of somebody coming after them that he was too late to warn them, one way or another, of the person already inside. Harry and Luna had already entered. He did the one thing he could. He reached with his mind until he located Minerva McGonagall asleep, but only barely so. He knew it would scare the elder woman to be awoken by a voice in her head, but it was the easiest way for Mahad to make contact and alert the professor. "Minerva," he sent, disturbing her mind enough to awaken her. His alarm in her mind settled quickly. "Potter is in Ravenclaw Tower. The carro's noted. Hurry!" It took the stern teacher only a few seconds to figure out who had sent the message. As soon as Mahad had confirmed that she had understood, he left her alone again, just in time. Mahad could feel the message being spread as Electo Carrow summoned the Dark Lord. It hurt his head. He took a deep breath as gravity yet again decided it was human. This time, however, he landed somewhat gracefully on his feet. After a few seconds, it let go of him again, and he was hovering an inch above the ground again. He put on a grim expression when he realized that if there would be a fight, which there probably would, then he'd have to shred his old white robes and become the Dark Magician again. Now that would be interesting to see. A loud bang came from inside the common room, and Mahad did not need to see what was going on to know that Electo had been stunned. Then he heard a female voice from inside. "I've never stunned anyone except in our DA lessons. That was noisier than I thought it would be." It was, Mahad realized. Most Ravenclaws had awoken from the sound, and footsteps were heard from above. Young voices were heard as they discussed the fate of the disliked teacher. When Amicus Carrow ran up the stairs, the magician had just enough time to hide himself before the livid-looking professor attempted to open the door.
"Where do vanished objects go?"
"I don't know, do I?" he yelled, not only angry but also scared. Electo, are you there? Have you got him? Open the door!" He received no answer from his stunned sister, and his fear grew. That was also the moment Professor McGonagall decided to turn up. "Professor Carrow, may I inquire as to what you are doing?" She looked at him as if he had turned rather mad. "Trying to get through this damned door!" the male Carrow shouted, while attempting to take it down by firing a wide variety of spells at it. "Come and get Flitwick! Get him to open it now!" "What, isn't your sister in there?" Professor McGonagall asked. "Didn't Professor Flitwick let her in earlier this evening at your urgent request? Perhaps she could open the door for you. Then you needn't wake up half the castle." "She ain't answering, you old besom. You open it, darling. Do it now." "Certainly, if you wish it," Professor McGonagall said, with awful coldness. Mahad had to smile. He had not changed his mind. Ever since Luca Caruso had been tortured, he had been convinced that McGonagall was a valuable ally. She had proven it once again. She answered the question and let the dark arts teacher in. She allowed the door to be opened just a second longer than standard, so Mahad, too, could get through. Amicus did not notice the additional professor. He had only eyes for his sister, who was laying on the floor surrounded by Ravenclaws. The Carrow went hysteric, demanding to know who had done it. Overreacted, claiming that the children had killed his sister. "She's only stunned," Professor McGonagall said impatiently, who had stooped down to examine Electo. "She'll be perfectly all right." "No, she blundered and one once!" Amicus bellowed, still hysterical. "Not after the Dark Lord gets hold of her. She's gone and sent for him. I felt me marked man, and he thinks we've got Potter." With a look of utter horror on his face, he looked around. "We can push it off on the kids," he said suddenly, his pig-like face suddenly crafty. "Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll say Electa was ambushed by the kids, them kids up there." He looked up at the starry ceiling towards the dormitories, "and we'll say they forced her to press a mark, and that's why he got a false alarm. He can punish them. Couple of kids, more or less. What's the difference?" "I really hate people like you," Mahad whispered, just loud enough for the two other professors to hear. Mahad's sharp face showed the exact emotion he described as he stepped forth. More than one Ravenclaw jumped in fear and surprise and ran up the stairs back to the dormitories. Professor Moshishan! Amicus Carroll called out, the tone of fear in his voice growing in intensity. What are you doing here? Mahad did not speak. He was shaking with anger. He would not stand for such injustice. Nobody present really knew how to deal with him. This was nothing like they had ever seen him before. They were dead scared. Even Professor McGonagall seemed wary. It took him about 2 seconds before he decided what to do. He walked forth until he was standing only a few inches away from the squat man. He knew that the children were watching, so he took the time to say one final thing. Go back upstairs. The children did not hesitate a second. Faster than Mahad had helped or possible, they had disappeared. The only ones left in the common room were he, Harry, Luna, Professor McGonagall, Amicus Carroll, and the unconscious Alecto. Faster than a snake, Mahad's hand closed around Amicus's throat, and the energy he had gathered closed around Amicus. The veins that were slowly swelling turned black. What are you doing? He asked, his voice sounding odd due to the strong hand around his throat, hindering his vocal cords. I'm taking something from you, Mahad said, then let go. Amicus fell to the ground, only barely conscious. He looked with an angry expression at Mahad. What the bloody hell did you do? I stopped your energy flow, Mahad said. It's a bit like going into a coma. Permanently. He sighed as he saw the horror grow on the man's face. Professor Moshishan! Professor McGonagall gasped, shocked. She heartily felt sorry for the man who, in his cowardice, had attempted to blame the children. But it was somewhat alarming to see someone do something as horrible as that so easily. Harry and Luna discarded their cloak. Professor McGonagall, the young teen said, his tone agitated. Voldemort is on his way. We have to evacuate the castle. You were right, Professor McGonagall said, even more shocked at seeing her former student there, while looking at Mahad. That is given, the magician said unamused. His senses had never betrayed him before. But Minerva had already lost all interest in the Egyptian. He sighed as McGonagall, in her still partly panicked self, tried to convince Harry to flee. Mahad alerted the other heads of houses about what was going on. He was pretty sure that Slughorn would never quite recover from the shock of being awoken by a voice in his head, but he obeyed. He was, however, distracted by Harry's absent-minded behavior, as if his conscience was constantly dragged away from him. Mahad had no idea why Harry was after a diadem, and quite honestly, he was not really concerned with that. Mr. Potter, have you not learned to shield your mind? The magician asked, concerned. It is not healthy at all to have such a link to somebody else's mind. The expression that appeared on Harry's face was almost comical, had it not been for the worried concentration. So I've been told, he said dryly, then turned to McGonagall. Time's running out, Voldemort's getting nearer. Professor, I'm acting on Dumbledore's orders. I must find what he wanted me to find. But we've got to get the students out while I'm searching the castle. It's me Voldemort wants, but he won't care about killing a few more or less. Not now. Harry's voice died away. You're acting on Dumbledore's orders? McGonagall repeated, with a look of dawning wonder. Then she drew herself up to her fullest height. We shall secure the school against he who must not be named while you search for this object. She looked at Mahad for agreement, and the Egyptian nodded once. He sighed. It would mean that as soon as the fight began for real, he'd have to shred the human appearance he had created and become the dark magician. It was unavoidable. Is that possible? The teen asked. I think so, Professor McGonagall said dryly. We teachers are rather good at magic, you know. I am sure we will be able to hold him off for a while if we put our best efforts into it. Of course, something will have to be done about Professor Snape. And if Hogwarts is about to enter a stage of siege with the Dark Lord at the gates, it would indeed be advisable to take as many innocent people out of the way as possible. With the Flume Network under observation and apparition impossible within the grounds, there's a way, Harry said quickly, and he explained about the passageway leading into the Hog's Head. Potter, we're talking about hundreds of students. I know, Professor, but if Voldemort and the Death Eaters are concentrating on the school boundaries, they won't be interested in anyone who's disapparating out of Hog's Head. McGonagall nodded, and was about to summon her Patronus when Mahad informed her that the other heads of houses already were informed. Professor McGonagall looked taken aback for half a second. Then she nodded in thanks and quickly moved out of the common room, followed by Harry and Luna, who had hidden themselves underneath Harry's cloak again. They descended 2 more floors before Mahad caught on Snape's presence. Snape is straight ahead, he told the stern teacher. McGonagall nodded. I will deal with him. Can you set up defenses around the school? I will do what I can, Mahad said, and to McGonagall's horror, disappeared through the nearest wall. Heather, Aunt, Leanne, and Cole had stuck together after Professor Muto had saved their hides. Beaver Warrior and Panther Warrior had led them to Cole. The two oldest had left, but one of the three Cole had not known had decided to stay with them. He was a seventh-year Hufflepuff who, just like most of the people at Hogwarts, had thoroughly feared Professor Muto after finding out he was possessed. Now that the spirit had saved his life, he felt like it was time to figure out how things really were, and had therefore decided to stay. As soon as they had been somewhat safe, he had seen their obvious lack of fear and demanded answers. Aunt and Cole provided them as much as they could, though it wasn't all that much they could actually tell. Cole had then asked Panther Warrior if he could do anything for Frederick. A day later, the creature returned with a very confused Gryffindor. When Frederick, many months later, received a message on his galleon telling them that Harry had returned to Hogwarts and that they'd be fighting, they immediately made their way towards Hogwarts. The elder Hufflepuff, who was the only one who could apparate, took them all for sidelong apparition, one at a time. Now they were all gathered inside the room of requirement. Neville explained to all who had suddenly appeared. Many outlaws had gathered down there, ready to help defend Hogwarts if they had to. They were waiting, though Cole did not know for what. June did not seem to care. She had laid down in a yellow hammock and closed her eyes. The most eventful moment was when Tracy Davis entered the room through the hallway that came from the Hog's Head, together with a man with Shabby Man and Dean Thomas. The room of requirement suddenly sprouted Slytherin banners, and more than one person was shocked at the sight. To most people, the presence of the silver snake was ominous, and they all glared at the single Slytherin in their presence.
What? Tracy asked. I can't help it. Be glad that this place shows that people from all houses can stand united. Jeez.
Peter laughed. Sounds like something Rebecca would have said.
Minus the punches,
Ginny added dryly. Peter laughed louder. Then Harry Potter stormed back into the room, so clearly taken aback by the sudden increase of numbers that he slipped down a couple of steps. Hurry, what's happening? The Shabby Man asked. Voldemort's on his way. They're barricading the school. Snape's run for it. What are you doing here? How did you know? We sent messages to the rest of Dumbledore's army, one of the Weasley twins explained. You couldn't expect everyone to miss the fun, Harry, and the DA let the Order of the Phoenix know, and it all kind of snowballed. Calder and he and his friends were just as responsible for a large part of the people present. With the help of Beaver Warrior and Panther Warrior, they had informed the freed Muggleborns that a battle would soon begin at Hogwarts. They had recognized the creatures as the ones who had helped save them in Azkaban and had not doubted their message once. 36 Muggleborns had arrived during the time Harry had been gone. The increase in people able to fight was dramatic. We have to get to the Great Hall to get organized, Harry said. They are evacuating the younger kids through here. Somebody immediately rushed off to give Aberforth the message that his pub would remain a sort of improvised railway station. Aunt and Heather exchanged an alarmed glance. They will send us away, she whispered to Aunt and Cole as she looked at a red-haired woman who was arguing with her daughter, who also wanted to stay and fight. The girl was 16. They had barely turned 13. Aunt was still 12. They would throw them out head first. Cole was actually quite grateful for that, but Aunt and Heather looked as if they wanted to fight. Aunt and Heather wasted little time and hid themselves from the direct view of the adults, who would send them away immediately. When everyone set off for the Great Hall, they followed in the rear, receiving a smile of appreciation from Frederick, who had seen what they had done. He, too, would probably be sent away, but was not as obviously young as they were and had lasted for the time being. The enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall was dark and filled with stars, and below it the 4 long house tables were lined with disheveled students, some in traveling cloaks, others in dressing gowns. Every eye was fixed upon Professor McGonagall, who was speaking from the raised platform at the top of the hall. Behind her stood the remaining teachers, including the Palomino Centaur, Ferenz, and the adults who had arrived to fight. Evacuation will be overseen by Mr. Filch and Madame Pomfrey. Prefects, when I give the word, you will organize your house and take your charges in orderly fashion to the evacuation point. And on the other side, they would not be allowed to stay and fight. The chance of slipping out of sight slim. What if we want to stay and fight? A boy from the Gryffindor table shouted, where Aunt, Heather, and Cole had gathered, despite 2 of them not belonging to the house. Many voices shouted agreement, among them Aunt. If you are of age, you may stay. Professor McGonagall replied, and many voices protested. Once again, ants was among them. Professor McGonagall ignored them. Those not of age would leave. That was the way it would be.
What's Professor's name?
A girl from the Slytherin table shouted. It has, to use the common phrase, done a monk, Professor McGonagall replied, and a great cheer erupted from the Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, and Ravenclaws. We have already placed protection around the castle, Professor McGonagall said, but it is unlikely to hold for very long unless we reinforce it. I must ask you, therefore, to move quickly and calmly and do as your prefects... But her final words were drowned as a different voice echoed throughout the hall. It was high, gold, and clear. There was no telling from where it came. It seemed to issue from the walls themselves, like the monster it had once commanded. It might have lain dormant there for centuries. Cole's eyes went wide, and he unconsciously moved closer to Heather, who herself looked rather frightened. I know you are preparing to fight. There were screams amongst the students. Cole was among those producing them, and everyone looked around for the source of the sound. Your efforts are futile. You cannot fight me. I do not want to kill you. I have great respect for the teachers of Hogwarts. I do not want to spill magical blood. Give me Harry Potter, Voldemort's voice said, and they shall not be harmed. Give me Harry Potter, and I shall leave the school untouched. Give me Harry Potter, and you will be rewarded. You have until midnight. For a second, time stood still. Everyone was looking at everyone, but at last all eyes turned on Harry. Cole noted that Professor Marcheshon almost seemed amused at the ultimatum. Then a figure rose from the Slytherin table, and she raised a shaking arm and screamed, "But he's there! There! Someone grab him!" Before anyone could react, Pansy was pulled down to a sitting position.
Are you absolutely out of your mind?
A different female voice asked from the Slytherin table. Cole recognized the voice as that of Tracy Davis. The girl with the dark eyes and hair continued to talk loud enough for the entire hall to hear.
People like you, Parkinson, have for far too long given our house a poor name.
The entire hall fell silent and looked at Tracy, including McGonagall. Harry looked perhaps not surprised, but certainly grateful. The entire Gryffindor house, and also people from several other houses, were ready to react at once if someone besides Parkinson would claim something similar. Then yet another voice spoke up. It was a fifth-year Slytherin who said, "It's true. If one listens to the students of the other houses, they all sound as if Slytherin House stands for prejudice, wickedness, cowardice, and haughtiness. That was never the point. Alright, fine. Our founder may have been a power-hungry bastard." Cole was certain that Professor Slughorn had never looked quite as shocked as he did when someone called one of the founders a bastard, especially someone who called their own founder for a bastard. The collective reaction was shock. The fifth-year Slytherin ignored them, with prejudice against Muggleborns, but that is what Salazar Slytherin stood for, not his house. Our house stands for cleverness, ambition, determination, resourcefulness, and traditionalism. Not one of these are bad qualities. They turn in bad qualities when they exceed proper proportions, but that counts for all houses. The girl, whoever she was, had long since exceeded the issue at hand. Nobody had indicated that her house was worse than that of the others. Perhaps Parkinson had, but that was all. Her words did not come from something that had just happened, but seemed more to be a long locked-away frustration that finally was allowed to show itself.
"Please, Professor McGonagall," she said, turning towards the somewhat taken aback teacher, "don't judge our house because of recent events. There have been enough of us who hate this just as much as everything else, and we do not want to deliver Harry Potter. I am convinced that there will be more Slytherins who want to fight than just me and..."
She made a gesture towards Tracy, whose name she had forgotten.
"Astoria, you can get that idea directly out of your mind,"
an elder Slytherin girl said.
"Mama would kill me if I let you fight. You will leave the castle with the other underage students. You aren't even 16 yet."
Astoria sat down and muttered something only those in her direct surrounding could hear.
"Nonetheless," the person who probably was her older sister said, "what Astoria says is true. I know that I and several others in my year and house are just as willing to stay and fight you-know-who as many others."
Astoria perked up and looked wide-eyed at her sister, as if she could hardly believe that her sister was saying such a thing.
"Something happened. I do not know what, but some of us has talked about it. Professor Muto taught us to reevaluate our convictions and views. It wasn't pleasant, but it was productive. We all agreed that what they have been teaching us is wrong, right? She asked and looked at the people sitting around her.
Yes, I will sustain fight,
Theodore Nott said silently, and so did several others of the 7th year Slytherins. Professor McGonagall looked actually quite pleased, but also disturbed. I hope you realize that the people you might come to fight are your parents. Cole gasped. He had never considered the fact that Death Eaters could have children, but thinking through it, it would be illogical if they didn't. Fighting their own parents. Cole went pale just thinking about it.
I know, Theodore Nott said, but if my dad tries to kill one of my fellow students, who am I not to interfere?
I think some of us carry the idle hope that our parents might change their opinion if they see we have taken this side, a 6th year said, and looked at his younger sibling sitting at a different table. This younger sibling was a Ravenclaw, and Cole had heard that his full-blood parents had been furious when he ended up in Ravenclaw instead of Slytherin. The younger sibling nodded while looking at his older brother. Then the hourglasses exploded. Once again, they had been mended at the beginning of the school year and had been fine ever since. Now, with a loud bang, followed by the clattering of gems falling to the floor, the newly destroyed hourglasses demanded attention. Everything went silent for a moment, but nobody reacted further. They were already used. I repeat, those of you of age may stay, the rest of you follow your prefects, McGonagall said, unwilling to show how touched she was. Slytherins can go first, followed by Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Gryffindor. Cole was amazed to see that there were more Slytherins left than Ravenclaws. Astoria hugged her sister quickly before hurrying off with a somber expression. Cole followed his prefect quickly. Heather sighed, dejected, and followed her house as they left the Great Hall too. Looking behind himself, Cole saw Aunt and several other Gryffindors being forced out by Professor McGonagall. Yes, Cole would have loved to have some of Aunt's courage. They made their way to the room of requirement as quickly as they could. The majority of the student body fitted in the room as it expanded at rapid pace. There, the houses kind of dissolved. People talked with whomever they wanted to talk. Astoria was congratulated by people from all houses, and she accepted the praise gratefully. Heather and Cole were soon joined by Aunt, and slowly, the students started to trickle out of the school into the Hog's Head. Aunt, Heather, and Cole were among the first ones to leave. When they reached the Hog's Head, however, the place was abandoned, and the door was wide open. Uncertain about what to do, now they walked out where they found all the students who had left before them. They were standing gathered as if watching a spectacle. Cole, Aunt, and Heather joined them and pushed to the front so they would be able to see what was going on. All the while, June was casually sitting on Cole's shoulder. The sight that met the 3 second years was rather frightening. At least 24 Death Eaters were laying on the ground, either dead or knocked out. It was hard to tell. An additional 24 were standing with their wands raised, all pointing it at one and the same person. They were all ignoring the crowd. In front of the Death Eaters stood the King of Games. Behind him stood Stummon's Skull and Curse of Dragon were flying above them. Jun jumped down from Cole's shoulder and sat down on the ground, watching, interested. Yugimoto, or more accurately, the spirit of the puzzle, had a concentrated expression on his face. The Death Eaters looked plain scared. Not a word was spoken. It was as if the spirit consciously avoided any form of communication. A Death Eater attempted to kill someone's skull with the killing curse. It hit the creature full in the chest, but it only looked a bit annoyed. The Death Eater yelped as a crushing fist came towards him, but did not hit. Confused, the Death Eater looked around before being hit by a flash of lightning. The Death Eater died. 2 standing too close were severely injured. 3 more down. Cole got. The spirit, Atem, as Aunt had told him he was named, was not even doing an effort. He was facing an incredible amount of Death Eaters, and he had no problem at all. Mercilessly, the 2 creatures got rid of the Death Eaters, killing them, injuring them, or simply knocking them out. They seemed not to care. Neither did the spirit. The crowd was growing at quick pace, and soon they had built some sort of circle around the fighting Death Eaters and the spirit. When the Death Eaters realized that no matter what they did, they could not harm him, they changed tactics. As if on cue, they turned to the careless students and yelled, Avada Kedavra! They did not seem to care who they hit. Fools, Atem hissed, almost sounding saddened. The spells were caught by a white force which destroyed them before wiping out the remaining Death Eaters completely. Not even a corpse was left. They had simply disappeared. Mirror Force! It whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Cole realized he was right. It looked exactly like Mirror Force. Within a matter of minutes, the spirit had made around 50 Death Eaters unfit for battle. It was quite scary. The students who had been in the line of the curses fell to their knees from relief. Being that close to losing their lives would make anyone shaky. Then the spirit, who was receiving scared but also grateful glances, turned to Aberforth.
Are they evacuating the castle?
Yes, Aberforth confirmed, himself not comfortable with being around the being that was so feared, especially at being feared with reason.
Hogsmeade is safe now. I take it enough students want to know the outcome of the battle. Perhaps they should stay.
Atem suggested, not unfriendly. He was highly aware how scared everyone was and did his best to show them they needn't be. What are you going to do now? Peter asked, who also had been forced out of the castle since he was not of age. It bugged him to no end. There were only 3 weeks left before his birthday. Nonetheless, Professor Flippercat forced him out.
Peter,
Atem said, somewhat surprised at seeing him there. Curse of Dragon and Summoned Skull faded away. So, where did you leave Joe? Peter asked, helping Atem to make the others more at ease around the dark being in front of them.
Raphael is taking care of him.
Atem said, distracted, as he tried not to think too much about the friends who were not directly involved in this all. Cole saw that Peter's attempts were not really helping, and most of the students were still rather uncomfortable. Then the crowd opposite from where Cole was standing started to shift as someone pushed their way forward. A man about Professor Muto's age with long white hair stumbled out of the crowd. Cole recognized him as Ryobukura. You know, Atem, he has a good question. What are we going to do? The spirit was about to reply, but Rio beat him to the point. Don't give me that look. I am helping.
Rio.
Atem sighed and looked around himself.
Look at this.
He made a gesture at the ground, indicating the dead or injured Death Eaters. Cole noticed that Rio flinched. So did several of the students. Nobody seemed to know what to believe. Then Atem pointed at the castle.
That is where I am going, and that will be worse than this. And up there it won't be Death Eaters, but children. Can you take that, Rio?
The white-haired man lost his confidence for a second, and it did not go unnoticed.
Stay here. Take care of the injured, save their lives, and explain to those with questions. I am going to Hogwarts, and I might not return. Give me a little peace of mind, knowing that at least you are fine.
Yone! Rio said, obviously hurt.
You'll have to accept that you cannot protect anyone, least of all yourself. Stay here. Here you can be of use.
Atem said, sounding rather harsh. Fine, Rio said, and crossed his arms, dejected. But you better get back alive. Atem smiled for a split second.
I have never broken a promise yet.
Then he left, making his way through the sea of students who parted for him like a pack of doves for a cat. Rio stood there, looking a bit forlorn amongst the fallen Death Eaters. It was only after the crowd of students started to dissipate that Cole realized that Atem hadn't actually promised his friend anything.